All right, my friends, I have three big stories for you today. It is Monday, March 31st, 2025. My name is Darren Gerdes. I'm just a professor trying to provide context in the war in Ukraine. We'll start with Hungary. Hungary will view Ukrainian attacks on Russia's energy infrastructure as a threat to its own sovereignty, says the Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó. In an interview with Russian media, he stated that Hungary experienced oil supply disruptions due to Ukrainian operations, equating attacks on Russian industrial facilities to attacks on Hungarian assets. Wow. So, that's where the Hungarians are. They're very tight with Putin, but it might not last all that long. The time has come to punish Orbán, says Germany's next government. Okay, Merz's incoming coalition wants to press the EU to look at withholding funds and suspending voting rights from Hungary. Hungary has been the fly in the ointment for some time. Orbán's nightmare. Germany looks to suspend funding of EU's worst offenders. And here's an article from Politico. The time has come to punish Orbán, Germany's next government says. Just a few paragraphs. Germany's incoming government says it will press the European Union to finally add some bite to its bark over misbehaving countries, in a thinly veiled reference to Viktor Orbán's Hungary. The conservatives of incoming Chancellor Friedrich Merz and their likely center-left coalition partner, the Social Democratic Party, have agreed to demand the bloc withhold funds and suspend voting rights from countries that violate key principles such as the rule of law, according to a draft coalition agreement seen by Politico, like Hungary. I mean, we're talking about Hungary. That's kind of the idea. While Hungary wasn't mentioned by name, the draft agreement is clearly referring to the EU's worst offender, which for years has been accused of taking a wrecking ball to democratic norms, curtailing the freedom of the press, restricting the independence of judges, so on and so forth. And it goes on and talks about what's happened over time. So Hungary's in their crosshairs because they've been doing this for so long. Okay. Next big story. This is Putin's propagandist. His name is Alexander Dugin. This is Anton Gerashenko talking about him. Dugin says, "We will destroy everything and everyone in Kyiv, Odessa, and Kharkiv." Russian propagandist Dugin says he's Putin's advisor, one of the main ideologues of the Russian world. He has promised to launch Orishnik strikes on Kyiv to destroy everything and everyone. This, he said, will be in response to violations of the ceasefire by Ukraine. He obviously doesn't mention any Russian attacks or ceasefire violations or anything like that, but he says in 30 days, we will collect a huge amount of facts about the Ukrainian side's violation of the agreement. Okay, yeah, I don't know it's going to work out quite like he says, Pure, but here he is being interviewed on CNN by Fareed Zakaria.
But also to wage a broader cultural war against the West. My next guest is one of the key Russian thinkers behind that vision. Some call him Putin's brain. For decades, the philosopher Alexander Dugin has argued that Russia is not just a nation, but a civilization that is destined to lead a new Eurasian empire. And now he sees the election of US President Donald Trump as a historic turning point. He has a new book called The Trump Revolution, A New Order of Great Powers. Dugin joins me now from Moscow. Mr. Dugin, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
You write in your most recent book that Putinism has won in the United States. What do you mean by that?
I think that now we assist a huge transformation of the global system. Trump, in my opinion, is something very special. It is not just a charismatic leader, but he represents a kind of ideology that changes the balance of the power in the world. So we have the different United States, not the stronghold and the headquarter of globalism, but the kind of sovereign national state, global power with traditional values as well, with totally different agenda on the level on the international affair. And in these new conditions, I think the Putin's Russia and Putin personally stops to be the main enemy, the main evil guy, bad guy.
He's talking about how let's stop there for a second. He talks about how Putin is not the main enemy in this new condition of nationalism. Now, nationalism doesn't have to lead to this. Reagan was pretty nationalistic, even though he cooperated with other places around the world. He was not like a globalist like maybe a Biden or an Obama would have been. But still, he was a nationalist, but not one that was looking at the Soviets and going, you know what, let them do what they want. So these two things don't have to go hand in hand, but he's saying, yes, it does. And in this scenario with Trump, it does. And that, hey, now Putin and Trump can work together because after all, they're both about traditional values, which is not accurate.
I think that Trumpists and the followers of Trump will understand much better what Russia is, who Putin is, and the motivation of our politics. So we have now immediately we have discovered many points that are common for United States of America, Trump's America, and Putin's Russia.
Would it be fair to say
we've discovered many points that are common? I think he's working really hard to make those points seem more common than they are. They're not the same thing, especially when you're talking about, say, traditional values or how American traditional values conservatives particularly think. That's not the same as where Putin and his traditional values are.
What you're saying is that there is now a kind of deep ideological alignment between Trump and Trumpism and Putinism, and it is against Europe. The United States and Russia, in that sense, are now together, and Europe.
So that seems to me to be the wrong question. The populists that follow Trump are just angry at the government and want to not have anything to do with it. That's maybe not, that's anti-globalist, but not because they're anti-globalist. It's because they don't want to deal with that thing over there. It's not the same as what he's talking about here.
European liberalism is in some sense the new enemy.
We have many points in common with Trump's America, much more than it seems on the surface. But maybe
no, he doesn't. And we'll talk about some of these sub-points here. Just listen carefully.
Maybe it is too early to speak about the real alliance between U.S. and Russia against Europe.
He's talking about it's too early to talk about an alliance of the U.S. and Russia against Europe. Listen to that.
Because it is not against Europe, it is against globalism. But nevertheless, I think that if, for example, Trump would withdraw United States from the war against us in Ukraine, there could be a situation that we will fight against European globalists.
Did you hear that? So if Trump was to withdraw the support for Ukraine, it could be a situation where we in Russia are fighting against European globalists. Like that is coming down the pike. If you don't it hurts my head just to think what could be happening if we miscalculate here.
European liberals in Ukraine without America. So I think that Trump, sooner or later, and maybe sooner than we presume, he will discover that Putin has absolutely nothing against United States, no reason to continue the fight, no reason.
Okay, so this is patently false. Putin does have things against the United States. The United States is still doctrinally the bad guy to the Russians, but the marketing, the charm offensive is that, hey, look, we don't have any problem with you. It's these guys over here we have the problem with. We're fine with you. You go your own way, we'll go ours, and we'll kind of split up the world, and we'll stay over here in our territory, in our sandbox. Of course, their sandbox means occupying Ukraine and enslaving their neighbors, and our values shouldn't speak to that.
Or to oppose, or to no field of competition, and that is different from China.
What do you see as the core elements of ideological similarity or affinity between Trump's America and Putin's Russia? Steve Bannon says it is that, these are two white Christian nations preserving their sovereignty, battling.
And that is such a short-sighted explanation when you think about, okay, they're both white, so largely. I mean, Russia's very white, and the United States, while it's mixed, has a majority white population, but that's short-sighted. And white Christian, the way that we define Christian in the United States and the way that they define Christian in Russia, and actually the church attendance and actual Orthodox belief, and I don't mean Orthodox in the Orthodox church sense, but I mean adherence to that, night and day. I mean, it's just unbelievable that you would take that kind of short-sighted approach.
Being a certain kind of multicultural liberalism. Would you agree with that? How would you define it?
I would say that first of all, there is agreement of the realism in international relations. Realism believes in sovereignty, in the absolute freedom of the countries to behave.
When he's talking about realism, he's also talking about a might makes right kind of scenario that ignores the rule of law of international laws that have been constructed. And that's what they're trying to get away from, and particularly in Russia, which has violated this left and right. Okay, at any rate, here's more about Dugin. Here are the facts on Dugin. Dugin's father was a high-ranking member of Russia's GRU. In the 1980s, Dugin was a member of a neo-Nazi group, Pamyat, which pushed radical nationalist and anti-Semitic agenda. 1997, Dugin published Foundations of Geopolitics, outlining his vision of a Russian-led Eurasian empire built by weakening Western influence through disinformation, subversion, and the exploitation of regional conflicts. Does that sound somewhat familiar? Dugin now works for the Russian government propaganda machine, and some quotes by him: "We are not fighting against Ukraine, we are fighting against the West. We must destroy the West." In 2022, we must kill, kill, kill. There should be no more conversations. As a professor, I believe so, he said in 2014. As a professor, I don't think that that's a very good plan of action myself, but okay. A new Russian empire must be built on the ruins of the USA and Europe, he said in 1997. So again, America is no longer, America, we don't have any problem with you, he says, but what really the America that we knew for most of our lives, he has a significant problem with. He has no problem with America if they change course, as we seem to be doing, and we'll talk about that in a moment. The Russian Renaissance can only stop by Kyiv. If we take Kyiv, we destroy the enemy's identity. Okay, so that's where Dugin is. All right, let's go to the third big story. Trump. Yesterday, he was talking about how he's angry and pissed at Putin. Here's a little bit about that, just 10 seconds.
In an exclusive phone interview on Saturday, the president told me, quote, "I don't fire people because of fake news and because of witch hunts." Mr. Trump said he still has confidence in Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. Just hours ago, President...
Okay, so that's a little preface. Apparently, Waltz had used Signal for other groups, so Waltz might not be with us all that much longer. I mean, the odds that he will be fired just went up. Now, this part about Trump being pissed.
Trump called me to tell me he is, quote, pissed off with Russia's President Putin and threatened to impose secondary tariffs on Russia's oil.
Okay, so that's where we are yesterday. And then today he's talking like this. Trump threatens Zelensky with big problems if he backs out of extortionate U.S. minerals deal. Here he's being asked about it, and he says something about Zelensky, and then he talks about Putin. Just listen to hear how he talks about each of them.
The way, I see he's trying to back out of the rare earth deal. And if he does that, he's got some problems, big problems.
I know that's hard to hear, but he says if Zelensky tries to back out of the rare earth deal, he's got big problems. Now, here's how he talks about Putin.
About Putin, I don't think he's going to go back on his word. I've known him for a long time. We've always gotten along well, despite the Russia hoax. It's a hoax created by Clinton and Schiff and all of these lunatics. And I certainly wouldn't want to put secondary tariffs on Russia, but if they were put on, it would not be very good for them.
Okay, he said this.
I don't think he's going to go back on his word.
I don't think he's going to go back on his word. I've known him for a long time. I don't think he'll do it. I think I can trust him. Okay, so that's where he is on Zelensky, which he talked a lot harder about than Putin, but okay. That's where we are right now. Now, Trump is also doing something to the U.S. economy, and this actually matters because what's going to happen to the U.S. economy could have an impact globally as well. Trump vows to impose tariffs on all countries. The U.S. president denied reports that the tariff would target only 10 to 15 countries. Quote, "We'll start with all countries and see what happens. I haven't heard any rumors about 15 countries or 10 or 15, Donald Trump said. According to El País, the European Commission is preparing not only symmetric countermeasures by April 2nd, the date Trump's tariffs are expected to be announced, but also considering a full shutdown of the EU market to U.S. goods. This is absolutely terrible as far as just doing some damage to injecting uncertainty into our diplomatic relations and to the markets. I looked at my own portfolio yesterday, and I had double-digit growth last year, and I'm negative 3% in the market this year. So, and this is because of this kind of thing. So it's pretty bad. Tariffs are taxes, says McFowle, and he's right. And Peter Navarro, one of Trump's advisors, or former advisors at least, is spot on wrong. Navarro goes full Orwell on Fox News Sunday. The message is that tariffs are tax cuts. Tariffs are tax cuts. So I've been teaching this wrong for 20 years. Is that what you're telling me here? To claim that tariffs are tax cuts is nonsensical. Whose taxes are cut by tariffs? Journalists, please ask him to explain such claims. So let's just hear what Navarro has to say as he's defending this.
Well, you heard Lucas's reporting there where the president says he doesn't care if the prices go up on U.S. cars. So what's the message to the U.S. consumers?
And that's what will happen. Prices will go up on U.S. cars because of tariffs on foreign automobiles. If you want people to buy your cars, make better cars. That's the solution.
Consumer.
The message is that tariffs are tax cuts, tariffs are jobs, tariffs are national security, tariffs are great for America. Tariffs will make...
Tariffs are jobs. They're protectionist jobs for specific industries, but they are not tax cuts. They're not good for national security necessarily either. They could be, depending on what it is or how extended you are, but it's generally speaking, this is not the way to go.
America great again.
Well,
okay, so tariffs are not tax cuts. In fact, let's look at it on Grok. This is Grok AI. Do tariffs function more like a tax or a tax cut? Let's just ask it, see what it says. Tariffs function more like a tax. They're essentially government-imposed charge on imported goods, which increases the cost of those goods for consumers or businesses buying them. When a country levies a tariff, it raises the price of foreign products entering the market, which can protect domestic industries by making their goods relatively cheaper in comparison. However, this comes at the expense of higher prices for consumers and potentially reduced competition. Think of it this way: if a tariff doesn't reduce the tax burden on anyone directly, like a tax cut would, lowering income or sales taxes, instead, it adds a new cost layer paid either by the importer, who then passes it on to the end buyer. Economists often model tariffs as a consumption tax on imported goods. That's right. That said, the tax versus tax cut framing of the perspective, proponents argue that tariffs can indirectly act like a tax cut for domestic producers. So it can be for a tax cut for, say, the automobile industry or somebody like that, but it's not for consumers. And we'll all pay a lot more because of this boneheaded policy that is full on the wrong direction. But ask me what I really think. Okay, so here's in response to Trump's actions, the European Commission plans to close EU markets completely to American goods if needed, according to El País, and we were just talking about that. But that's where we are now. Okay, Senator Mark Kelly from Arizona, the astronaut, he's saying, I'm angry too. I'm angry with the dictator Putin. He's a murderer. But I'm also angry with Trump, who made the boneheaded move of giving away the two best pieces of leverage before the negotiation started. That's why this is so messed up. Yeah, I'm of like mind with that. And it's very weird to be agreeing with people that I generally don't agree with, but I can't agree with Trump here either. So there we are. Okay. 3 years ago, the Ukrainians chased the Russians out of the Kyiv area, and the Russians say that they withdrew because they were, being just nice, and they were were willing to withdraw to make a deal or something along those lines. No, they withdrew because they were forced out. 3 years ago, our warriors, this is Zelensky saying, our warriors liberated Bucha from the Russian occupiers, and the world saw that the Russian occupation, what it truly is, people killed in the streets, people graves in the yards of ordinary houses. Since then, no one in the world can say that they do not know what Ukraine is defending. Ukraine is fighting for the lives of its people. It's fighting to ensure that no one ever again does on our land what the Russian occupiers did. Eternal memory to those whose lives were taken by the Russian war. Eternal gratitude to all our people who are defending Ukraine. It was 3 years ago today. Thank you, my friends. Thank you for the time, the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.